For this week's vlog review, I chose Freaks, a movie that came out in 1932 and was directed by Tod Browning. Freaks was written by Todd Robbins, Willis Goldbeck, and Leon Gordon, and the cinematography was done by Merritt B. Gerstad. Freaks stars Wallace Ford, who plays Frozza the Clown, Leela Hyams, who plays Venus the Seal Trainer, Olga Baklanova, who plays Cleopatra the Trapeze Artist, Henry Victor, who plays Hercules the Strongman, and Harry and Daisy Earls, who play Hans and Frida, two little people in the film. Tod Browning made the decision to cast all the sideshow characters as actual sideshow performers, rather than just actors in costumes. This actually unsettled a lot of people in the 1930s because around this time, not many people were very knowledgeable on people with disabilities, and they felt unsettled or scared by their presence. A lot of the MGM executives wouldn't even come to the set because they didn't want to be around the actors. Originally, Freaks was supposed to be 90 minutes, but after the initial viewing audience's horrified reactions, Tod Browning decided to make a cut that was only 62 minutes to present to the public, because a lot of the scenes in the original cut were too gruesome or too scary for most audiences. The story begins when a showman is addressing a crowd of people in a room. He brings them all over to this box and tells them to behold the attraction that is inside. What's in the box isn't actually revealed to the audience until the end of the film, so the showman begins to tell the story of how the atrocity came to be. We are then taken to a flashback, where we see Hans and Frida, two little people who are to be engaged. Hans is spending most of his time looking up at Cleopatra, a normal trapeze artist. Frida doesn't really like this, and she begins to explain to Hans that his behavior is kind of inappropriate. Hans assures her that nothing is wrong and that he is simply just admiring the performer. After her act, Cleopatra heads backstage and begins to talk to Hans. She can clearly see that Hans is invested in her, so she begins to chat him up a little bit more. She then figures out that Hans has a huge fortune to his name, so that when he dies, whoever he marries will get all of his money. She then comes up with a brilliant plan, in her mind anyways, to steal his money after marrying him. Along with her actual lover, Hercules the Strongman, Cleopatra devises a plan in which that she will marry Hans and then give him poison to kill him and take all of his money. Because of Hans' infatuation with Cleopatra, he doesn't see the ruse in any way, and he gleefully accepts the marriage proposal. However, during the wedding party, as Cleopatra and Hans are seated at the end of the table along with the other freaks, Cleopatra begins to get very drunk, and she actually kisses her actual boyfriend, Hercules. This makes Hans very sad, although none of the other performers can actually realize. It is then when the performers are all welcoming Cleopatra into their family, saying that she will be one of them, that Hercules begins to laugh and mock Cleopatra. Because she is so drunk, she doesn't control her temper, and she begins to get very angry. Towards the end of the supper, Cleopatra actually stands up and calls all of the performers slimy freaks, and kicks them all out of the room. At this point, Hans has realized that not everything is as it seems, and he begins to suspect what Cleopatra is up to. But at this point, she had already put poison in his drink, so he felt very sick. However, he did not die. As Hans is lying in his sickbed, Cleopatra tries to give him some more poison in the medicine, but this time, Hans knew what was going on. He quickly pours out the medicine as she is not looking, so that she thinks he took the poison. At this point, Hans has already begun to plan with all of his other performing friends how to get revenge on Cleopatra. Once Hercules finds out that Venus, the seal trainer, knew too much about the plan, he heads over to her wagon to kill her. Frozza the Clown, Venus's new love interest in the film, sees what's going on and heads over to the wagon as well to stop Hercules. The two get into a brawl, and eventually they explode out of the cabin. It is at this point where one of the scariest scenes that I've ever seen in cinema occurs. Hercules gets caught with a throwing knife from one of the performers, and as he begins to crawl away, all of Hans's friends begin to crawl after him in the rain and the mud. It is one of the most horrifying images that one can see, especially in the 1930s, when people didn't really know about people with disabilities. This particular scene is terrifying, not only because of the music that is played over the scene, but because of the way that all the performers are crawling after Hercules as he is wounded and begins to try to get away. It is not actually shown on screen what happens to Hercules, but in the original cut he was supposed to be castrated and become a sideshow attraction himself after all the performers are done with him. As for Cleopatra, at this point Hans has figured out and begins to corner her with the rest of his friends. She runs after the wagon crashes, but soon enough the sideshow performers are able to catch her, and it is then revealed that the attraction in the box from the beginning of the show was Cleopatra, but this time she's been mutilated and turned into some sort of human-duck hybrid. Originally, the climax was supposed to be the end of the movie, but Todd Browning decided to add another scene so that the film would have a more happier ending. In this scene, we see Venus and Frozzo bring Frida to Hans's new house. It is there where the two reunite and Hans apologizes for the misdeeds that he has done to Frida, and it is assumed that they get back together. In my opinion, Olga Baklanova's portrayal of Cleopatra is one of the strongest points in the movie. She is able to make the character so obnoxious and so unbearable that the audience is sure to find her as one of the most dastardly villains in film. Just the way she treats Hans is so disrespectful, and not many people can treat another human being like that. I also need to accredit Harry Earls on his portrayal of Hans, because without him, the audience wouldn't feel that sympathetic for the character. But the way he's portrayed makes it just so sad and so embarrassing for him that he would be treated by Cleopatra like this. Todd Browning's main message with this movie was to show how the people were treated despite having disabilities and being in sideshow performances. However, the main criticism that I have about this film is the subplots that revolve around the main plot. In my opinion, I feel that there are too many and that they get sprinkled in throughout the story and are very hard to follow. One example of this would be the love relationship between Frozzo and Venus. Originally going with Hercules, Venus is cast out until she meets Frozzo the clown. The two begin to hit it off and she helps him with some of his gimmicks. But overall, their love isn't actually vital to the plot in any way. Another example would be the two conjoined twins. There are many scenes showcasing their daily lives. One of them is actually married and the other one is engaged. But after that point in the film, no more information is really given about them and you don't even see them again. This leaves the audience feeling a little bit left out or confused about what is going on and why they haven't been given any more information. Overall, I really enjoyed this film for its acting, its cinematography, and the creativeness of its overall story. I believe that this film is very important in film history because it shows off how some directors didn't really care about the regulations and they just wanted to make their story, regardless of what rules were put onto them, which is why this film was banned in so many countries. Even though the film is kind of terrifying and a little bit dated, I strongly recommend viewing because I actually really appreciated the experience to watch one of the older films and learn more about some film history.